The race for governor. By the way, we do have a voter guide on the website. It's been up there nearly a week. If you haven't heard about that yet, go to KFIAM640.com. Down the right-hand side is the John and Ken voter guide. It's for the ballot propositions.
And I agree with all the choices.
Well, that's good to know. Allegedly, you were a part of formulating the decisions.
Yeah. All right, well, I reaffirmed them.
It's not clear if you come to all the meetings on these things, but
hey, I'm like
you're
Obama.
there in spirit.
I'm like Obama, right? He misses 60% of the intelligence meetings. So,
actually, I did send John the email before we put it up on the website to confirm his agreement.
Yes, I agree with everything.
It's very agreeable today, which doesn't sound like most of the show, does it? Anyway, it's there for you, along with statewide offices. And we're getting conflicting stories over how much protective gear the nurses wore and when. When Duncan first showed up at the hospital, clearly with symptoms, but they still hadn't gotten the Ebola test done. It's pretty clear now that the nurses weren't given a lot of direction or a lot of protection.
If you believe the nurses union news conference yesterday, there was zero protection that they had that would be effective in stopping the transmission of the Ebola virus. They weren't wearing hazmat suits. There was no protocols that existed. And Thomas Duncan was allowed to lay out in the open among other patients for hours. And there was so much diarrhea and so much vomit that whatever they used to clean it up, the towels and the sheets and everything else, was piled. You had medical waste piled from the floor to the ceiling. And you had maybe 70 hospital employees involved in his care. Now, 70 of them. And it looks as if none of these people were put into a quarantine immediately, even though they were openly handling his bodily fluids.
The media and others are piling on the poor nurses there. And maybe it's time that you got to hear their side of the story and all this stuff about protocols were broken, right? No, the response from this union, from the sources that they have, is that there were no protocols, that the nurses weren't given much instruction, that they weren't given much equipment to wear. And the whole reaction to Thomas Eric Duncan when he first came in, despite the fact that he'd said he had been to Liberia, was he's just like another guy with bad flu. Oh, let's see what we can give him and send him home. And he comes back again and he looks worse. And eventually they test him for Ebola. But during that time, good Lord, he was exposed to many people in the hospital.
But that's a total failure of the entire bureaucracy at this Texas hospital. All the administrators, all the disease specialists there, the doctors, lots of expensive degrees, the nurses, a complete breakdown, and a complete breakdown at the level of the CDC and the Texas State Health Department, which is supposed to be educating everybody at that hospital.
Yeah, I mean, this is stunning to me.
It's overwhelming. All right, let's go to the people. 1-800-520-1534.
This could be like a short voice line run, couldn't it?
Let's go to James. You're on the John and Ken show, James.
Hey, I work for a company, and we go to hospitals all over Southern California. And I go specifically where all the blood goes. And let me tell you, if Ebola ever came to California and the way the blood is treated and handled in most of the hospitals around here, I think we're all screwed.
Why? What have you seen?
These are not highly trained people dealing with the blood and dealing with, dirty instruments. These are kids with high school degrees, not highly trained specialists or anything. And the biological waste that gets taken out basically to the dumpster is handled by the janitors.
So, yeah, it's sort of a low-grade job there, right?
It is. It's not, you would think in a hospital where everything goes to be decontaminated, you would think it would be a decently skilled job. But, where all the, Ebola rags and all those things go, it's just regular people. These aren't highly trained people. We need to get something, more training for these people than anyone else.
Have you seen that they're sloppy with the job that they do?
When we go into a lot of these decontamination rooms, all the instruments and all the bloody stuff is just kind of piled up in containers, not closed containers. I could touch it if I wanted to, but I stay away. And it's just there waiting to be cleaned. And if it doesn't, get cleaned right away, sometimes they sit there for hours.
All right. Thanks for the call, James.
We already know, sadly, that with hospitals, some people go in for like a minor procedure and they pick up one of those terrible staph infections, right? I mean, that's been going on.
Oh, thousands of people get
and now we got the
hospital.
multiple resistant ones that they end up killing people that were not in there for anything related to that. So, I mean, hospitals where sick people go, and there's going to be bodily fluids around.
I think
some people won't go to hospitals for that reason. They're just afraid of all the other things they could catch.
I feel that way. I don't like going into a hospital because I know what human nature is. Human nature is the doctors and the nurses get tired of washing their hands all the time. They get tired of going through the protocol of dealing with the infectious medical waste. Charles, you're on with John and Ken. Go ahead.
Hey, how you doing? I've been listening to you guys for the past couple of days about this, and what I have to say is from personal experience since April. This healthcare system is so messed up. We couldn't handle a pandemic if we had God on our side.
What's messed up about it?
Well, when I went into the hospital, I had a doctor do a procedure on me, an angioplasty, and he blatantly used something I was allergic to in me. And I caught him using it, and he looked in my eye and said, "I'm only using a percentage." And this doctor, he screwed my leg up. And I'm looking around, I'm trying to find a lawyer. A lawyer won't touch it, because there's not enough evidence.
All right, thanks very much. Let's go to, have you talked to many people in Dallas? Is Ebola in the conversation constantly these days now?
It really is. I work in an elementary school, and the parents come in and talk about it. That's how I found out about the second patient or the second nurse today being diagnosed. Was one of the parents came in and told me they know my son's a paramedic, and they're asking, "What does your son say? What are they doing?"
Do people have any confidence in all the medical bureaucracies?
No, no, sadly. No, we don't, because I don't know how much fluff they're feeding us and just maybe telling you what you want to hear. Oh, no, there's nothing to worry about. And what will it be next week? Oh, gosh, maybe there was more that we should have worried about.
All right.
No, that is the thing. I mean, I realize that that's a little vague, but personally, I don't, just to make it clear here, based on everything I've learned, I don't think Ebola is that easily contagious. However, I don't like the way CDC dealt with our first case. It's horrible. It almost couldn't be worse.
How do you screw up from go? I mean, I can understand if you're overwhelmed and there's cases popping up in Washington State and New York and Texas and Cleveland, all these different places, and you got to send all these teams out. But it's like the first time, and they screw up.
What?
Yeah, I'm just looking at a headline story out of Orange County. The third largest hospital, Mission Hospital, is closing the operating rooms because of too many patient infections. And their accreditation is in jeopardy. That's nice to know.
Yeah.